What's up, YouTube? It's Ryan with Educated to Employed. Wanted to talk to you today about job descriptions. Realistically, job descriptions are where you need to start your entire process. So let's jump into it. Realistically, you need to be able to understand a job description in all of its facets in order to be able to effectively write a resume, to interview for a position. So it's really the beginning of everything that you need to know when you're applying for a new position. So, what goes into a job description? It really depends on a lot of different things. So, first and foremost, you need to understand, who is your audience? What type of company are you looking at when you're applying for a position? Because different companies have different levels of regulatory requirements, and that's something that we'll talk more about in future videos. But I wanted to begin talking about this because it's very important in understanding how much wiggle room you may or may not have with your level of experience. So when we talk about regulatory compliance and things like that, you're talking about your largest employers for the most part. The U.S. government, state governments, government contractors, large public traded companies. These companies all have strict requirements to ensure that they are participating in equal opportunity employment activities, that they have fair and legitimate employment practices. So they need to make sure that their job descriptions are as accurate as humanly possible when they post a position. So when we start to talk about slightly smaller organizations, non-publicly traded companies, privately held companies, you start to find a little bit more wiggle room in terms of what a job description says versus what they might be willing to consider. So, what does this all mean? There are multiple parts to a job description, and understanding the use of those parts is going to be one of the biggest things that you need to understand when you're reading through a job description. So, first and foremost, reading a job description in its entirety is mandatory. You cannot get away with only reading part of a job description. I know a lot of people who just look at the basic requirements and they say, that's good enough. I meet these requirements. Let me try and apply for this. And unfortunately, what that results in is you spending a lot of time and a lot of effort putting resumes together, putting cover letters together, sending that information out, ultimately to not get a response. So what I want to try and help you do is really target your efforts on positions that are going to make sense for you to apply for. Because as a past recruiter myself, I know that unfortunately the demands of my job don't allow me to necessarily consider every applicant that I would like to consider. I have to look at the information that I'm provided and make a determination. So, those basic parts. You have a summary, you have job responsibilities, you're going to have things like basic and minimum requirements, as well as company descriptions. And each of these serves a very unique purpose. So for those of you who are listening to this or watching this video, company description for someone who's just coming out of school is more valuable than you would ever give it credit for. You want to make sure that the organizations that you're applying for match up with the ideals and belief systems that you have so that you find satisfaction in your employment. So if you're someone who, is really environmentally or social conscious, you don't want to go to work for a company that doesn't share that ideal, because you're going to go in and feel like you're living a lie every day. It's great to collect a paycheck, but ultimately you want to make sure that you find value and that you're providing value in the environment that you work in. Secondly, understanding the company culture is going to be key for you to really know if it's the type of environment where you're going to find growth or if you're going to find new advancement opportunities. So you want to make sure that you know these things going in, and we'll talk about doing homework in a later video. But ultimately, this is going to give you some information before you ever even look up a company. The next piece is going to be the general summary of the job. This is going to tell you quite a bit about the type of roles and responsibilities it has, who it's going to report to, and things of that nature. When you get into the roles and responsibilities section of a job description, this is where you're going to start to understand how things match up with your particular skill set, maybe with your soft skills, with skills that you've obtained through other employment opportunities. So this is where you're going to match things up. And we'll take a look at a couple of job descriptions in this video a little bit later, but ultimately you need to be able to start identifying where you're a good match for this. The next piece that you're going to see are going to be your basic minimum requirements. Basic minimum requirements are where you're going to see the majority of those differences between the different types of organizations. So the next thing that I like to tell people to think about is the language in the job description. And the reason why the language is important is because it defines who is not going to be considered for a particular position. So when you see words like required, minimum, in lieu of, relevant experience, preferred, these are all indicators as to who they are actually going to consider. Another thing to keep in mind when you look at these is what is the current state of the employment market. So the employment market is kind of like the housing market. There are buyers and sellers markets in housing. There are candidate markets and employer markets in the recruitment world. So you want to understand what's currently happening. If you're not aware, right now is probably one of the biggest candidate markets in history. The United States Jobs Report has reported for the first time that our actual number of job openings is greater than the number of people who are actively seeking new opportunities, which means that it's a low demand for new jobs and a very, very low candidate pool. So in theory, this should mean that there's a little bit more flexibility with companies in terms of who they're looking for. But in actuality, you still have a lot of professionals who are moving back and forth between positions, trying to find that level of happiness that they may not have experienced in the last 10 years. So they are starting to make a couple of moves here and there. So when we see those words, minimum, preferred, depending on the type of organization, those are going to be your indicators as to whether or not you're going to be considered for this opportunity. If a job description for a large company says that a minimum of 5 years of experience in XYZ is required, then if you don't have that minimum criteria, you're not going to be considered, or at least if you are considered, you're probably not going to be the best qualified applicant. If the job description says that a bachelor's degree is required, then without a bachelor's degree, you're not going to be considered for that opportunity with a larger employer. So when we talk about smaller employers, your private employers, small startups, things of that nature, they aren't bound to all of the same rules as the big employers. Now, granted, they come with a little bit more risk in terms of the types of opportunities and the longevity you may have, because a startup could fold up at any point in time. But ultimately, you're going to find that a startup may have the ability to consider somebody who has a strong set of soft skills, a strong desire and will to work, and ultimately, they may be able to take a chance on you. The last thing that you want to think about is the job title itself. There's a lot of information that you can pull out of a job title just by understanding what different words mean. So when you look at things like manager, director, lead, vice president, or any other vernacular in that way, these are the titles that we all want to have, but that's going to be someday. When you're first starting out, applying for jobs with these types of titles are typically going to require you to have extensive experience, years in the field, management experience, or a significant book of business that you may be bringing to an organization. So Notable exclusions from this would be things in the realm of sales. A lot of times, if you're looking for a sales position, you will find that a sales position will list account manager, district manager. These types of titles are really entry level titles alongside of representative type roles, and you can be considered for these with a minimum of college education, some work experience depending on the organization. So there are titles out there that are exempt from this. Also, a lot of things in retail are going to be exempt from this. If you're looking at a retail management position, for instance, retail management may consider somebody who hasn't had management experience but does have a bachelor's in business or something of that nature. So there are exclusions to these concepts, but they are relatively few and far in between, and they aren't really the type of role that many of you may be looking for. So those are a number of things that I want you to keep in mind when we're looking at these. We're also going to go ahead and take a look at a couple of examples. So let me jump into that so that we can talk about those, and I'll show you exactly what I'm referring to when we look at big companies versus small companies and all the language in between. So here we're looking at a staff accountant position for a hospital, and there's a lot of information in this job description. So it's very important that you read through all of it if it's something that you're interested in applying for. So first you can see your shift, so you know that it's a day shift position. You can see its employment status in terms of whether or not it's a regular full-time position or if it's going to be part-time. The job summary is going to start to tell you exactly what the position is responsible for, who it reports to, as we can see that it will report to the accounting manager here. So you might be able to use that information to find a contact within the company. And then as we start to get down into the job responsibilities, you'll see that it's working with grant programs. So you know that the department is funded, or that the hospital is funded partly by grants. So if that's not something you have experience with, you're probably not going to be the best fit candidate for it. As well as other general accounting functions. And accountants are a great example for you to understand that if there's something on a job description that you don't know, if it's a acronym that you're not aware of or a term that you don't know about, then go out and look it up. So for instance, ERP is probably a really good one. If you don't know that information, you want to make sure that you're educating yourself. But when we start to come down and look at the required education and experience, here are those words that I mentioned earlier in the video. We are required to have a bachelor's degree in accounting. With a hospital of this size and taking grants, it's very likely that if you don't have this minimum requirement, you're not going to be considered. You're also required to have somewhere between 3 to 5 years of accounting experience, and hospital experience is preferred. So that's your best fit candidate, somebody who's in that 3 to 5 year range, maybe a little bit more, who has experience in accounting specifically within a hospital. That's the best fit candidate. Additionally, they list out that they have preferred education, experience, certifications, and licensure, so maybe that's a CPA in this environment, and of course, the preferred master's or advanced certification. So you can see that there's a lot of information in this particular job description, and this role itself may not necessarily be a great fit for somebody without prior experience. However, it gives you a great understanding of the types of things that you're looking for so that you don't spend time applying to positions that you're never going to hear back on. Example of a job description for something that's outside of the realm of a college educated individual. We're going to go ahead and look at an entry-level machinist. So job description, as with the accountant level position, is very detailed. There's a lot of information here for you to understand what's going to be the best fit for you. And one of the first things that popped out to me when I looked at this was it's a family-owned business. So it's very likely that you're working directly with an owner if you are applying for this role, and that there may be a little bit of leeway in terms of what your experience has been, and really creating a case for yourself to say why you may or may not be a great fit for their organization. Now, the second thing that jumped out to me is that they are specifically looking for an entry-level machinist, and that it's a second shift position. So if you're not looking to be
working shift work, working second shift, then this may not be the right position for you. So you want to make sure that you're not wasting their time as well as yours applying for something that's not going to be a good fit. So again, the position summary is going to tell you exactly what it is that you're going to be doing. If there are things mentioned in here that you're not familiar with, then look them up. We live in this world where you can find anything on YouTube. Just really understand what it is that you're going to be doing to make sure that you're comfortable with the work. The essential duties and responsibilities are going to detail that out a little bit more, and it's going to speak to some of the other general day-to-day things that you're going to be doing. So for instance, when we're looking at this particular job description, it does mention cleaning, sweeping, mopping, and operating battery-powered floor cleaners. So you're not just working on the machines, you're also going to be helping to keep the facilities clean. Other duties and responsibilities are going to talk to you about maintaining clean, organized, and safe work areas, looking for clarification when you have unclear directions, general soft skills and things that you should be able to do as somebody who's just coming into their first real career role. You want to make sure that you're asking the right questions. And then, of course, with the essential skills and qualifications, we're going to see something a little bit different than we saw on the accountant side, where it focuses more on your soft skills as an individual. So we can see that there is a minimum requirement for a high school diploma here, but we can see that they're valuing things like excellent attention to detail, ability to work in a team environment, ability to process work accurately and in a fast-paced environment, and the ability to work independently with limited supervision. So those are the things that you need to be able to illustrate in addition to your proficiency in working with machines, working with metal in general. You really just want to make sure that you are the best fit that you can be given your background and experience. Obviously, then your mental and physical demands, the work environment, the hazards that come with working in this type of environment. So you want to make sure that you meet all of these criteria before deciding to apply to the position.
What's up, guys, and thank you for hanging out until the end of this video. I know it was a little bit longer. Let me know in the comments below whether or not you like the longer content or if you prefer to have something a little bit shorter. If you do like it, give me a big thumbs up. If you have an idea or a suggestion or something you want me to cover, please comment below so that I know what you want out of this channel experience as well. If you're looking for more content like this, career-based information, please hit the subscribe button and then ring the bell so you get notifications whenever I post new content. There's going to be a lot more coming. Come visit me on Facebook at Educated to Employed. Check me out at educatedtoemployed.com. I'm going to be putting a lot of written content up there here shortly. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.